This is Up for a Chat with your hosts Cindy O'Meara and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Cindy O'Meara.
And I'm Kim Morrison. And boy, do we have a very special guest on the show with us this week. Cindy and I have questioned a lot from political angles. What does it mean? How does it all work? Who are the people that are really making a difference? And one particular soul who has stood out hugely to us is the incredible Senator, the amazing Malcolm Roberts. Welcome to the show, gorgeous.
Thank you very much. Oh, if you can call me gorgeous, I'm happy to call you gorgeous as well. Beautiful smiles, both of you. You must have something really going on there. Very, very nice to see. Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Cindy and I have been really interested in all of the things that you do. You have a very colourful history and a very interesting one. Perhaps you wouldn't mind taking the listener back to where it all began for you and the journey it's taken that's led you into the position that you're in today.
Okay, well, I was born in India in 1955. My mother was Australian. My father was Welsh. We came to Australia when I was 7 so that we could get a better education. My sister and brother were both born in India as well. After I was, we lived in the Hunter Valley, Newcastle area, Central Queensland. I then did a mining engineering degree, graduated with honours with that. And then I decided, Kim, that I better go and learn something. So I worked as a coalface miner underground for one surface mine, but the rest were all underground in various parts of the country because mining it depends extremely on practical experience and people experience. And I loved working underground because you're in a small team of people, say 7 to 10 people, and you're independent and autonomous, but you have to get on with each other. And then I went over to America and worked for a very large coal company, the largest in the world, and then worked for the second largest in the world. And then what did I do after that? That's right. I just did what Australians do so well. I went broke traveling around North America and Canada and Mexico for about 15 months and sold my car, bought a plane ticket home, and then worked my way through the ranks, became a mine manager at a very young age. I think I was 28. Then after a few years of that, I turned around a few mines. And the secret to that was just working with people, being firm and being disciplined, but working with people. So that's the key to everything from what I can see. And then I decided I was tired of the bean counters running the show. So I went to the United States and did an MBA at the University of Chicago. And I had a few job offers in the States and got headhunted back to Australia to head up a very large coal mine, in which we set many new leadership practices and innovations, very, very successful. And then I went out and worked on my own and with my wife as a consultant for various companies here and overseas. And then Pauline Hanson heard me speak and said, would I like to run with her on a ticket for the Senate? And then I got into the Senate, and that's like swimming in treacle. So now I'm learning everything new again.
What was Pauline Hanson listening to when she asked you to run for the Senate? Because I believe it was on something that was quite controversial.
It was about climate change because as I call it, Cindy, it's climate fraud. There's no evidence that backs up the claims. It's an entirely politically driven thing. It's same as all the other things that the UN and the World Economic Forum are pushing. It's there to get control over people and to transfer wealth. That's all they're about. And she knew she's a very, very intelligent person, and she's got a ton of guts, and she just knew it was bullshit. So she called it out. But she also makes decisions and statements on facts. So she listened to geologists, scientists, farmers, people who are in touch with what's going on naturally, and they all said it's rubbish. So when I came along and had the science to back it up, she just jumped on it.
I was looking at all of your information that you have something to say on, and I know we're not going to go through everything, but I want people to go to your website, which I think is senatormalcolmroberts.com.
Am I right? It's Malcolm Roberts. Malcolm Roberts QLD, Malcolm Roberts QLD, 2 L's in Malcolm, .com.au.
Yeah, I want them to go to it because I think you have some incredible information on there. So the things that I saw was you had things on COVID, water, energy, climate fraud, as you call it, United Nations, property rights, foreign ownership, Murray-Darling Basin, tax reform, banking, PFASs. So I'm just blown away by your breadth of knowledge in all of these things. And I figured with your mining engineering degree and your degree out of Chicago, that it has created a pretty critical thinker in those terms. So could we, first of all, and please, we're naive, we were asking this of each other before we even got there. Could you explain what a senator does for the people?
Sure. The way our constitution is set up and the way our governance is structured, we have 2 houses of parliament, and it's based on. We're very, very lucky. We've got a combination of the American system of Congress, the 2 houses in Congress, and the British system, essentially of 1 house, but it's got 2 houses in it, an upper house as well. But the British system was set up. Then the Americans came up with a fairly new system, and we married both the best of both. And I used to be opposed to a monarchy. And then I faced the Turnbull referendum, and I was about to vote yes for a republic. And then I listened to 3 High Court judges, including the Chief Justice at the time, Gibbs, I think his name was. And I just immediately changed my mind and voted to preserve the monarchy. We are a monarchy, but we're a constitutional monarchy. So in a monarchy, the king or queen give orders, they run the country. In a constitutional monarchy, the Constitution is the top sovereign entity of our democracy, and the king or queen serve the Constitution. And so, unlike in America where you have a tired old political hack becoming president, here the monarch is appointed, the head of state is appointed, and it's appointed from a family, which means they've got responsibility, but they haven't got power. Their only powers come from reserve powers from our Constitution, which is a wonderful way to do it. It takes all the political shenanigans out of the head of state. So I like that. Now, the House of Representatives is based on equal-sized electorates, and that's the lower house. That's where most legislation, not all legislation, is initiated. That's where the party that forms a majority in the lower house, they form the government, and they have the stewardship of running the country for 3 years. Now, the Senate, when Australia started, it's important to understand this. When Australia started, there were 2 powerful states in terms of population. That was New South Wales and Queensland. And between them, they could have ganged up on all the other states and just pushed whatever was good for New South Wales and Victoria. So the smaller colonies, Queensland, Tasmania, population-wise, South Australia and Western Australia, all said, hang on a minute, we need protection here. So we're not going to go in and get hijacked and get our wealth stolen. So they formed the Senate, just like in the United States. And the Senate became the House of Review. And the Senate is also elected on a proportional basis. So if you get 30% of the votes in states, you'll get 30% of the senators. So it's a much fairer system. So your individual issues, passing on ideas from the community, passing on the wishes of the community, doing the will of the people, that comes from the lower house. The Senate is the House of Review and a state's house, supposedly, but it's been corrupted by parties. Parties have corrupted Australian politics, just like American politics, British politics. There was a well-known French philosopher, Simone Weil, a lady who only died about in her 40s, I think, but she wrote a wonderful book called On the Abolition of Parties, because she said once you form parties, politicians in the parties put their number one goal as looking after the party and growing the party, not the country. Mm. And so she's absolutely right. So it's been corrupted, but nonetheless, that's the way the Senate works. It works as a House of Review. We've got very strong powers for having inquiries and holding people accountable. But that's weakened somewhat, Cindy, by the fact that the 2 parties, the 2 tired old parties, Labor and Liberal Nationals, gang up. And so then if you want to really know what's wrong with our governance at the moment, it's the fact that the Liberal Nationals and the Labor Party are basically identical in policy. They pretend to argue, they pretend to fight, They pretend to call each other out, but their policies are almost identical. And the policies come from the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. And so that's where we've gone wrong. And what happens? So now I'll get into some of the frustrations in the Senate. As I said, it's like swimming in treacle. It's really, really awkward. The bureaucrats, the politicians gang up to suppress truth. And you and most people think, and I used to think, that government decisions, policies, legislation are based on data. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Quite often they contradict the data. And that's what's doing the damage. The number one factor that's destroying our country, crippling our country, is the fact that they contradict the data. They don't make decisions based on data. So that's the first thing in our governance. The second thing in our governance is that we've ceded much of our policy to the United Nations and World Economic Forum. We've become lackeys for them, and they're just parasites to get control over people and steal our wealth.
So talking about our constitution and the referendum coming up, can you explain how WEF and United Nations are perhaps involved in this, or are they not involved at all?
No, they're involved in this. The term First Nations people came from Canada. That's the first thing. It's part of an international push through the United Nations. The United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, Article 19 says that government must not only consider but be subservient to the Indigenous people. And what the United Nations is doing with that is they're trying to destroy the control of governments over their own people, trying to subvert that, and they're trying to steal property rights. If you look at native title, the native title bill was brought legislation was brought in 1992-93 by Paul Keating, the Labor Party. And a lot of people in Australia in the cities think, oh, we gave the land back to the Aboriginals. No, we didn't. All the United and the Native Title Act, the preamble is littered with the word, Cindy, United Nations. So it's a vehicle for the United Nations. And what the Native Title did was it stole land from the existing owners and then locked it up in land councils. It didn't hand it out to the Aboriginal members of the Aboriginal communities. And if you go to communities, I've been to every Aboriginal community in Cape York and some of the Torres Strait Islands, and I've been to the Cape York ones 2 or 3 times. If you go to those communities and in the Territory, if you go to those communities and say, what's your number one problem? They'll say, we cannot get access to land. So the land councils have locked it up. And that's a deliberate ploy of the United Nations. The United Nations and World Economic Forum have senior members of both organizations have said that their goal is to put in place an unelected socialist global governance, to turn around freedom, to turn around capitalism, which doesn't exist anywhere in the world now. We've got pretty much socialist everywhere. But to get control of the planet, that the senior people, the man who drove the climate fraud was Maurice Strong. He's dead now. He died in 2015. He said he had 2 aims. One is to put in place an unelected socialist global governance, unelected. And the second one was to deindustrialize Western civilization. I mean, what kind of people are these? So that's basically what's going on. So the United Nations in particular is pushing for the voice. The United Nations is pushing for native title to lock up land. What they're doing with any communist agenda is they destroy families, because families are the backbone to welfare and looking after each other. They destroy religion because that gives some people faith. They steal property rights, which were stolen in this country by a Liberal government under John Howard in 1997, complying with the UN's Kyoto Protocol. So both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party have pushed Agenda 21, which is United Nations Agenda 21. Since 1992, they've pushed the Lima Declaration, which has destroyed our manufacturing sector since 1975. We used to be independent for just about everything, manufactured, primary production, mining, agriculture. Now we are interdependent, which is another word for dependent. So if I'm interdependent with you, means you're dependent on me and I'm dependent on you. So what they've done is destroyed Australia's independence. We're now dependent on other countries. So it's a very calculated way of doing it. The similar kinds of things are happening in Canada, New Zealand, Britain, North America. So it's United Nations push, it's global push. What was the other thing I was going to mention in there? There's something else I was going to mention, I've forgotten.
ask you, from your point of view and understanding and having lived in different countries, and particularly New Zealand, is this referendum anything similar to what New Zealand introduced back in the 90s with the MMP type of situation, or is this completely different?
I don't know enough about the New Zealand system, Kim. I do know that Winston Peters said it's not the way to go because it separates people. What else did he say? I'll see if I can find a quote here. I got a quote from, that's right. He said, you cannot have one group of people speaking, one small group of people speaking for all the Aboriginals in the country, because there's no such thing as all of the Aboriginals being the same. I'll see if I can find it.
Well, yeah, he was very big on that.
Yeah, anyone who thinks there is one voice for Aboriginals is insulting. They lack understanding, and what it does, it guarantees more money for activists. I think that was Winston Peters. But you've got a treaty, the Waitangi Treaty, isn't it?
Yes.
The Waitangi Treaty was made with the Maoris because when the British arrived, there was a system of land tenure and land rights in your country. The Maoris ran a system, and what that means is the system meant that my land is my land and I can keep you off it. I can do whatever I want with it. I can pass it on to my descendants and so on. In Australia, that was not the case with any part of the mainland. There was small cases of it in some of the Torres Strait Islands where they had a land tenure system. But Australia, the mainland, there was no such system. So there were so many. Australia was basically in the hands of families or clans or tribes, whatever you want to call them, small groups of Aboriginals, largely, and there was no system of land tenure. So the British could not make a treaty with anyone. There was no opportunity to make a treaty. The High Court in 2020, in the Love case, ruled that there was no sovereignty for Aboriginals after 1788. So the purpose of the voice is to set up an entity which can then make a treaty. And Albanese himself has admitted that in the Northern Territory. He's admitted it in various other places as well. The chief proponents of the voice have admitted that it's all about treaty. But then when the people started to wake up, they went silent on that. And one of the most disturbing things about this whole voice campaign, Kim, is that they've never given us details. They want us to change the constitution. They've never given us details. And the people are saying, go to hell. We're not interested in something that's not got the details. And what they've done is a very insulting process. They've said, just go with the vibe, do what's good for people. But they haven't given us details. They're treating Australians like mugs. And now we've got Anthony Albanese saying, yeah, it'll probably go down. But if it does go down, I'm going to legislate it. That's like giving the people of Australia a big fat middle finger, telling them to go to hell. So, and instead of facts, instead of details, they've had celebrities. I mean, what is an American basketballer like Shaquille doing here, pushing the voice? We've got someone wins a grand final, does a very, very good job as a grand final rugby league player, Nathan Cleary. Next day, he's on TV spouting for the voice. We've got celebrities, we've got entertainers, we've got academics, but we haven't got any facts. The whole thing is a sham, and they want us to do it on a vibe. And people don't realize this, but our constitution, I've already said, is the supreme governing entity of our country. It's the only constitution anywhere in the world, Kim, in which the people voted for the constitution. So it's a people's constitution. What they're trying to do now is they're trying to add a whole new 9th chapter with 3 vague clauses to give them basically an open slate, an open check for politicians to put in the details. That will, in essence, change it to a politician's constitution, the way it's implemented. We have got too much trouble in this country that has come from Canberra because we've got too many politicians interfering in too many people's lives on a daily basis. They're destroying our energy, destroying our families, destroying our constitution. I made a list here a couple of months ago, destroying education, destroying families, destroying health, destroying economic capacity and energy, destroying the food, lab meat, etc., property rights being stolen, destroying our money. Industrial relations is no longer looking after workers, it's looking after union bosses and big corporations. They've got huge immigration, destroying our housing sector, water, tax, censorship bill now looking at coming at us. These are all the things that they're meddling in and most of them are on behalf of the United Nations. They're destroying our country, not building it.
So I feel like you're one of the lone senators out there that I believe is speaking the truth. As soon as you said lab meat, you're my new best friend. I just think it's the worst food being a nutritionist. So
I agree.
How do you expect that we can make a change? This isn't even being spoken on in the media. It's all about the yes vote in the media. It's all about, yes, we should be going vegan and having lab-grown meat. Yes, we should be going to wind power and we should be doing solar and we should get rid of coal mines, etc. So how does one lone voice, or you and Pauline Hanson, or there's a couple out there, not many of you, how do we make a difference to what's happening in Australia? I feel like we're in a vortex and I don't know how we're going to get out of this.
Well, number one issue is, I'll get to the number one issue in a minute, but we've seen a big awakening in the last 3-4 years over COVID. Okay. When I first went into the Senate, in my first speech in the Senate, I called for us to exit the United Nations. And that was pretty radical. And I've called for exiting the World Health Organization as a start. Now that's pretty more mainstream. A lot of people don't look upon me as novel or excessive. Yeah. What would you say?
Two heads. Weird.
Conspiracy theorist. Yeah. I put away my, my tinfoil hat.
Yeah.
But that's woken people up. I never would have thought, just 7 years before I said that speech in the Senate, I never would have thought I'd be saying some of the things in the Senate that I said, because I was ignorant. When I started working on the climate scam, the climate fraud, I knew from my studies, because I had to keep people alive underground with proper fresh air. So I knew the composition of the atmosphere. So when they first started talking about this climate fraud, I went, what the hell are they talking about? Carbon dioxide can't do that. It's just physically impossible. But I thought, who's little old me? Who's little old me to go against the thousands of scientists and the thousands of politicians? And of course, I then said, well, no, it's just not right. But we all tend to sit back and think, oh, who's little old me to do this? So I started talking to a few scientists and I said, damn it, I'm right. So then I won't make a statement unless I can back it up. So then I did the research myself. I checked the research and I found it was crap. And then I started chasing going down the rabbit warren to find out where this crap was coming from. It's coming from the United Nations. And then I went further and found out what drove the United Nations. And I found out the United Nations was formed as a crooked, corrupt, incompetent, dishonest body to push for the globalist agenda for the big corporations, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, etc. So once you understand that, it all fits into place. And the destruction of our education system is to replace education with indoctrination so that we make people malleable and gullible. Then we've also got hideous, inhuman agendas, which really piss me off. But things like, gender bending. I mean, that is so wrong. Yeah. And they're distorting children. I mean, many kids have gender dysphoria. It's because they're going through a huge stresses physically, mentally, emotionally in adolescence. And they're being preyed on by pharmaceutical companies and doctors wanting to lop bits off their bodies and put them on drugs, destroy their ability to have children in the future, destroy their ability. And, of course, they don't know what's going on. And then when they get to 18, they think, oh, my goodness, I've made a mistake.
I've done.
And so then they can't be parents. They can't have their own children. And then we start seeing the suicides. But Big Pharma is looking at the moment at $3.2 billion industry in drugs for children to perpetuate their gender change. Of course, you can't change gender. You can just destroy lives. That's all. Then you've got the family law system, the United Nations. That came from the United Nations. So we've got all of this going on. But what you'll find is the health system, COVID, was a massive transfer of wealth going through, picking up the areas where the UN globalist parasites make their money. Big Pharma was a massive transfer of wealth. They were the beneficiaries. You've got childhood vaccines, which we can get into later if you want. But I've seen the evidence now that that shows all of the decreases in deaths due to the childhood injuries occurred before the introduction of the vaccines.
Mm.
And some without vaccines also had the same thing. So they're not due to vaccines, the decrease in deaths. The economic capacity, people are making money, the globalists are making money out of converting to wind and solar because of the subsidies that you and I are paying for. Food, lab meat. Bill Gates wants to come up with lab-grown meat, which is going to be carcinogenic for sure. You can almost guarantee it. Bill Gates was out here, February this year, and he had a meeting with Albanese. And afterwards, they said separately that the topics were climate, food, agriculture, health, energy. Well, Bill Gates has got not one qualification in any of those areas, not one, but he's got massive conflicts and interests in all five of them. So this is what it's about. It's about transferring our wealth and putting us under control. And that's nothing new. That's the been the call for governments for many, many years, and for individuals for many, many years, getting control of people.
And I think you're right. People are waking up. I look at my dad, like my dad's was in his 90s when he passed away during COVID in Melbourne by himself, just saying. And I look at him, he was wide awake in the 50s. So when we were born, it was very much about he wouldn't give us any medications unless it was a life-threatening situation. That's different. No medications, no needles, no nothing. So he was awake back then. And then I brought my kids up the same way. My grandbabies are still being brought up that same way. And I look at the health of our family. I look at it and I go, nobody wants to study us. No one wants to see, what's happening. I look at the food that we consume. We don't consume any ultra-processed foods. We grow all of our own foods on our farm. And I just think they're not interested in the people that are doing well. They're only interested in the people like transgender or very sick people or cancer patients and COVID. COVID to me was just the biggest sham, I guess. That's how I felt. I don't know if I should be saying this on our podcast. But
you just did, and you're right.
Yeah, I just felt like we never wore masks. We did everything. I've always done everything against the government when it comes to dietary guidelines. So I kind of went, well, they've never been good with health. So what makes me think they're going to get good now? So well,
you're on the right track, because Big Pharma's business model is to create drugs that'll make you sick and then sell you more drugs to make you better again. But that just creates another symptom. My mother had a very bright cousin from North Queensland, Charles. Anyway, he's dead now. Died long ago. He was so bright that the Americans bent the rules to give him citizenship almost immediately. He arrived in America. They took him over there to work on the defense early warning system. Because the Russians had missiles pointed over Canada into USA. So he worked on that, and he became an American citizen. And he told me, I met him once, and he told me he was sick, and he was popping one pill for something, and another pill for the side effect, another pill for the different side effect. And he said one day, he said, well, to hell with this. I'm going to do my own research. I'm intelligent. And he tossed the whole damn lot away and started taking up vitamins and started eating. No processed foods, no junk food. And that was it. So we have been conditioned to eat crap because it makes us sick. And then they can sell us a drug to make us better.
How can we change this? Is it a ground root thing, or are we going to do it from top level? Are we going to have to start at the bottom, or can we do it with you? How about you become Prime Minister? I think I'd vote for you.
Well, there's no vote for Prime Minister in this country. The Prime Minister is the leader of the majority party in the lower house, but thank you anyway. So there are two things. One is to do what you're doing. Spread the news, because that's extremely important. The mouthpiece media is owned by the same people who own BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, etc. So we can't get anything from the mouthpiece media. So that's why I'm coming onto your show, because we've got to spread the news through independent podcasters, independent news, truth-seeking, truth-pushing, and truth-telling, and freedom-loving. So that we've seen a huge increase in the independent media now as a result of COVID. So that's one thing. Secondly, everyone doing their own research. I mean, you've done your research. You've blessed with a wonderful dad who's opened your eyes, and now you're doing that to your grandkids, which is wonderful. So share the information with family, share the information with friends, with work colleagues, social colleagues, and then also vote for minor parties that are thinking along the same lines and that are willing to stand up and be counted. I mean, Pauline's got more balls than most of the men in Parliament. She just tells it like it is. People think that Pauline loves an argument. She doesn't. She doesn't like an argument. But there's one thing that she hates even more, and that is walking away from the truth. She will absolutely. She and I are just compelled to tell the truth. Then the other thing is, in addition to voting for the minor parties and not the two major parties, is to become candidates, become volunteers, become scrutineers, hand out how to vote cards, etc. So spread the word and vote and hold your politicians accountable. Well, we've now got a censorship bill coming up. It's called the Misinformation Disinformation Bill. It's pure crap. What they want to do is silence us, and they're trying to silence people like you, independent podcasters. They're trying to silence individuals. The people exempt from the Misinformation Disinformation Bill are the mouthpiece media and the government. Now, the government and the mouthpiece media were the biggest dispensers of misinformation and disinformation during COVID, during the climate fraud, and so many things. So they're exempting them and trying to nail us. So that means on these issues, on COVID, on the lack of a royal commission for into COVID mismanagement and deceit, people need to go and visit, turn up at the offices of their house, their representatives in the House of Representatives and their senator, to just turn up and say, I want a meeting, and keep coming back. Telephone them personally and keep trying until you get through. Write to them, not with emails. They're useless. Write to them with letters, hand-signed, handwritten, typed. It doesn't matter. But sign them and tell them they work for you. I mean, you're a citizen of Australia. You pay my salary. I work for you. That's my job, to listen to you and to then be a voice for you. Whether I disagree with you or agree with you, it doesn't matter. I've got to be a voice for you. So that
the
citizens
Senator,
at the top of our country, they're the only ones who can change the constitution, the governing entity of our country. So that means they're in charge, and they literally are in charge. But what's happened, Cindy, is we've gone and fallen asleep. We haven't held the politicians accountable. Now the politicians are working for the big corporations. Sorry, Kim.
No, sorry. I wanted to just ask you, you brought up BlackRock and Vanguard just recently, and I'm curious, I read somewhere, again, not sure if it's true, but they stand on being worth 20 trillion, if not already. It seems to be money is what governs our world, our ego, our identity, that the more money we have, even as individuals, we seem to liken that to success. How is this monopolization of our world under a massive conglomerate like these big wealth transference people, how do they sleep at night? And how on earth do you think us mere mortals are ever going, and I say mere mortals with love, not degradants, but how on earth do we keep showing up when this conglomerate of wealth is ruling the world?
Stop buying the mouthpiece media. They go broke. Okay, we don't listen to them, so don't use them. You said that they liken dollars to success. What I'd say, in my experience, and I've done a bit of work on myself. I've been married. I am married to the same woman for 32 years. And sometimes it's pretty challenging, as you know, with a marriage. And we've got kids, and that's the biggest personal growth process there is, having kids. We start to see what happens and how we influence, and we start seeing how we want to control our kids to various extents, right? And sometimes it's subtle, and you go, I can't believe I just said that. It's wrong, and so we then change what we're doing to our kids. But the issue is not left versus right or money versus poverty. The issue is control versus freedom. That's what I believe. And that battle for control versus freedom is within each of us. It's between two of us. It's between groups of us. It's between nations, and that's what causes war. So it's all about control versus freedom, in my view. Now, the big companies, the people who push the buttons and pull the reins in the big companies, they are probably control freaks. We know that we have an inordinate number of control freaks, proportional control freaks amongst the chief executives of the major corporation. We know that. We know that the same applies to politics. So we're getting the wrong people into this. I think we've also got to be very mindful of something else, and that is that humans are wonderful. So you would both be, I'm sure you're not perfect, but you'd both, we could count on you to tell the truth. We could count on you to care for people. You can count on most people in the world to care for animals, to care for the environment, to care for people. And I mean that sincerely. In fact, you wouldn't be here right now, Kim, if someone hadn't cared for you when you were about that long, right? You pop out of your mum, just like I popped out of my mum, and we were completely helpless. A foal comes out of a mare, and within half an hour it's up, it's shaking around, and in half an hour it's cantering, because that's how it evolved, because it would have been eaten on the plains if it couldn't do that. But you and I, we're vulnerable for years, totally dependent. So I know that even though your parents may not have been perfect, I know that someone cared for you. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. The evidence is you're here, right? So humans are wonderfully caring, and the people who do the best job of caring, of course, their kids survive. So their genes get passed on. That's why humans are caring, because we know it. And what we've been told is a pack of lies. We've been told that humans are greedy, rapacious, uncaring, irresponsible, unkind, the complete fabrication. And what they're saying is we need to protect humans, so vote for the government. Now, the government is made up of humans. See the illogic in it? But that's what the globalists are saying. The humans are destroying the planet with climate change. Humans are destroying the planet with not wearing masks. Humans are destroying the planet because they won't get an injection. Humans are destroying the planet because they won't inject their children with the toxin. So they're saying all of this thing, and so people scurry along. And because when it comes to fear, I mean, we're so set up. We have got a wonderful ability to reason, to think logically, but that can be bypassed by fear, be bypassed by emotion. And so what they do is they use fear in many, many ways. And most of the things that they try and instill fear on are invisible. COVID, climate, money, they're all invisible. So what's really going on, Kim, is, in my view, is that we try to control. Now, money doesn't give you much. It gives you an easier life, but if you sell your soul to get it, it's not worth it. So money is a substitute for control as well. People think they've got more control over their lives if they've got more money. To some extent, that's true, but not over the basics. That it comes from within. So greed, money, control, they're all manifestations of control, which is always beneath control. Ironically, there's fear. So these globalists are actually afraid.
Would you say then, in my humble opinion, no matter how much controversy or conflict there is in our world, or judgment or fear, I have a real deep belief that good will always prevail. Do you feel the same? And if
Yes.
so, if that's the case, as humans, as us, those listening to this podcast, is it best then that we keep showing up as our best selves,
Yes.
caring for ourselves, caring for our community, doing the best that we can, choosing where we put our dollar, honouring the people that are really working? And if we don't want to be the advocates, the vigilantes out the front, get in behind the people who are. Is that what you'd recommend?
Yes. Just reinforce what is good in us. We cannot use their tactics. I won't tell lies in Parliament. I won't tell lies anywhere, because that just brings me down to that level. So that destroys my credibility. It also destroys my inner self, my real self. So just be the best we can be. And I think we need to remember two things. What were they? I'm trying to put them together. Needs and forgive me. I have a mile of things going through my head. So beneath every single action of every single person, there's a need that's either not being met and we want it to be fulfilled, or it's a need that's being met and we want to perpetuate that condition. So everything we do. So Al Gore is a notorious liar on climate. He's a notorious fabricator. He's a notorious con man. He's a fraudster. He's made a lot of money out of this. But there's a need that's driving him. He doesn't see anything wrong with what he's doing. He's doing what he thinks is best. Now, his documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, it's really a science fiction movie. It puts so much crap out there, but he thinks he's on an agenda that, see, we only do what we think is good, whether it's for us or for others. So that's the first thing. So Al Gore, even though I see him as a crook, and a fraud, he's doing what he thinks is best. So that means we then look to what Christ taught us, and that's forgiveness. And the sages throughout history have talked about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not, in my view, it's not saying something like, "Oh, you just hurt me, Kim, but I forgive you." That's blame. Forgiveness is not, you did something unintentionally that hurt me, but I forgive you. That's a bit like blame. Another one is, you just did something, Kim, that hurt me, but we're all like that. That's human. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is no judgment at all about what you just did. Protect my life, protect other people's lives, but have no judgment, value judgment about what you did. Treat you as you are. Try and find the needs underneath what you're doing. So that's where Christ taught us about grace and compassion and forgiveness. So it's not about punishment.
I heard a beautiful quote that you might like on forgiveness. Forgiveness is the scent the violet emits onto the heel that crushed it. And when you really look, forgiveness is the scent the violet emits onto the heel that crushed it. And it's such a beautiful way to honor what it means to notice. I really loved, and I think Cindy and I would agree on this, is that we do know that people, I guess when I asked you before, how do people go to sleep at night? It's because what you just said, they actually do think they're doing the right thing. The people that are creating the science and the research behind giving the things like the vaccine the okay are really thinking that they're doing the right thing. This is humans. It would be a boring place if we all thought the same. But how do you bring people like that who are actually creating harm in this world? How does someone like you make a difference in a political landscape?
Politics is driven by numbers. So if we can swing enough people to get behind us, then we can change what's going on. So I'll give you an example. The Morrison government, the Liberal Nationals, introduced the cash ban bill. The Labor Party said it would support it. We got wind of it, and my office and I, what we did was show that to the crossbench senators, and they were totally against it. They were on our side. Excuse me. We went to the Greens, and the Greens, I think, have got some reprehensible inhuman policies, anti-human policies. That's quite clear. But they think they're doing the right thing. They're doing a lot of destruction right across the gamut, but in some areas they're pretty good. So they worked with us as well. We then went to the Labor Party and said, this bill has been introduced in the lower house. For goodness sake, you've got to vote against it. They didn't. They voted for it. It came to the Senate. But in the meantime, what we did was contact some grassroots members of the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. And they were fired up, and they put so much pressure on their Liberal members of Parliament and senators, Labor members of Parliament and senators, that when it came to the Senate, the bill was sent to a committee to have an inquiry into it, and it just stayed there. And what happened was I then moved a motion to get rid of it off the Senate list, and they got rid of it off the Senate list. My motion got up. So that wasn't because of me. It was because of the Liberal Party and Labor Party grassroots members. And that's what politics is all about. So Anthony Albanese, assuming this voice referendum goes down, will have a lot less political power after that. So he'll be more vulnerable, and he'll have to pay more attention to what he does and what he says, and be more honest, because they've been very dishonest in many areas, just like the Liberals were. So that's how people the power of the people still exists. The power of the people exists in terms of newspapers. Stop buying the mouthpiece media. Listen to the alternative podcasters. The media, and you'll notice the Australian, I'd say Rupert Murdoch is more astute than most of the other companies in the media. He listens and he makes sure that the Australian presents both sides of an argument. So I've got my concerns about him when he retires out of it, because his sons seem to be woke. But anyway, that's one issue. That's where the power of the wallet and the people's consumption of media determines what's on the media. Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, these people are being sought after by the people in the street, everyday Australians and Americans.
Yeah.
And so that's coming ahead. Podcasters are doing a fine job. You've got if you have a school principal is held accountable for what he or she is doing to destroy the curriculum or the schooling, the education of children, the parents need to get involved and hold them accountable and put pressure on them and put the pressure on the education minister. Same with food. Same with politics. Stop voting for the tired old parties. We have a habit in this country of voting for Liberals, and then when they screw things up, voting for the Labor Party, and when they screw things up, vote back for the Liberals. But what we've seen, Kim, is when I was a boy 40, 50 years ago, it was 45% voted Liberal, 45% voted Labor. And the 10% in the middle, they swung and they determined who was in government. Then it became 40%, 40%. Then it became 35, 35. In the 2019 election in Queensland for the Labor Party, 22% of people voted for the Labor Party. 22%. They only got one senator up instead of three. It used to be half and half. Now the Senate is increasingly Greens and crossbench. And the Greens are an aberration, I believe, because people tend to vote for the Greens because they're ideologically driven, and people don't understand science these days. And the Greens pretend they've got the science, but they haven't. When people start seeing the damage the Greens are doing economically, cost of living, and in so many areas, then they'll stop voting Greens. But that's what we have to go through, because the Greens are not that much different from Labor and Liberal anyway. So the policies are almost identical. So what I'm saying is, through that pain will come a change that's already underway in the voting patterns of Australians.
I think one of the things that I love hearing you talk about is health, because if we don't have a healthy community and a healthy country, both land and humans and animals, then we're not going to be thinking right. We're not going to have the manpower or woman power in order to do the things that we need to do. And I don't see Liberal, Labor, Greens doing anything about the health of the human population here in Australia. So we've seen since 1964 a rise of 4% across the board chronic disease to now 48% of our kids having chronic disease. Nobody is talking about this. And what I loved about you, I listened to you on a podcast recently, and you were talking about the all-cause mortality that's now happening at the moment. So not only do we have chronic disease, but we now seem to have a surge in deaths in the last 12 months. Was I right in hearing you say 40,000 excess deaths have happened? Did I hear you say that, or did I get that number wrong?
2022, 40,000, more than 40,000 excess deaths. And they came in, there's a wonderful statistician called Wilson Tsai. He's written two fabulous papers. I haven't got the titles with me. He's written wonderful papers which show quite clearly the very, very close correlation between vaccine injections. Sorry, they're not vaccines. They're experimental gene therapy-based treatments. Experimental between the injections that were given and the onset of deaths, excess deaths. Very clear. There's no doubt in my mind whatsoever. It's completely convincing. Ben Bornstein has gone through the English data and the UK data and found similar things. We're now getting statisticians confirming that kind of thing independently. So it's definitely there. But I think what the problem with health is that, just like so many other things, the government has said, oh, don't worry about your health. Leave it to us. We'll take care of it for you. And you can't have anything if you haven't got responsibility. So if you take responsibility for your health, you know this because you have taken it. It's quite clear. The thing we've destroyed in our country is individual responsibility. People want the government to do things. That's a sure road to ruin. And the government's, what was that saying about Big Pharma? How can you trust someone on your health that makes money out of your sickness?
Yeah.
Now, they said it more eloquently than I did, but that's basically what's going on. And their model is to make you sick and then give you pharmaceutical drugs to make you better. And all they do is create more symptoms.
Yeah.
In most cases, not all cases.
What I get really upset about is the prescribing benefit scheme as well as Medicare. So I'm someone who very rarely, unless I've put something in my foot and I need it taken out by a doctor, which happened recently, I don't use Medicare and I don't use the PBS. So I'm thinking, well, why in my tax dollar I pay a heap to Medicare and a heap, to the government for our health. why am I not getting a benefit for being someone who takes responsibility? There's no benefit in being healthy. There is on our own personal level. That's what I mean. Yeah. But financially, because that's where it all is. If you think about the COVID vaccine, many people took it because they wanted to support their family. They didn't have work unless they had the vaccine. Many young couples who have a new baby have it vaccinated because they will get government funding as opposed to not getting government funding. It's like they are financing the sick but not helping people who are taking responsibility. So how do we get the people, how would you get people to take responsibility and then get the benefits of that by maybe giving some tax breaks to them? And I know tax is a big one for you, so I'm hoping you can do that.
Well, I think that's just distorting the system to drive behaviours that I want. Okay, and I think that's wrong. I think we should have a very, very simple taxation system that's not about manipulating people. But we also have another side of things, and that is that we're government is kind of like an insurance company. All right, so if we have massive natural disasters, which we've had for many, many years, and which were far bigger in the past in terms of the destruction, the lives lost, then we rally around and support each other, just like the communities used to in the past. But in the 19th century, the community was a source of welfare. The family was a source of welfare. And it worked better because there was individual responsibility. Now we've got government, and government goes to excess, and government also then tries to look good, not do good, so that they can get voted and keep their power. It's all about control. So somewhere in the middle, you've got to have we need to have a government that is compassionate and looks after people, but doesn't take responsibility away from people. You see what I'm getting at? Mm-hmm. So if I think the best thing to do would be to simplify the tax system, make it completely neutral, and then people would have more incentive to work, they'd have more incentive to save, they'd have more incentive to invest, they'd have more incentive to look after themselves health-wise, because the best reward for looking after yourself health-wise is your health.
Yeah.
It's not about the tax breaks, which I'm sure you know. So,
most definitely. And I don't think I'm manipulating. I think it's just consequences, really.
Yeah, well, we can dress it up any which way we can. But, you talked about the incidents of government, of families getting injections because, I'm just checking someone looking at me through a window, checking families getting injections because they needed to put food on their child's table. Mm. That is absolutely inhuman. Mm-hmm. To say that I've got to get an intrusion into my body, some toxin that is still experimental, has not been tested, simply so that my kids can eat. That's inhuman. That's the stark reality of what government has become in this country. And Scott Morrison lied about the injection mandates, completely lied. And he was also the man that brought in injection mandates, drove them through the states. And he was the one who brought in basically injection mandates for childcare, childcare subsidy. That's right. When he was Minister for Social Services or Treasurer in 2015. Same person did it.
And he calls himself a Christian.
Yeah, but let's not forget, he would have done that out of the thinking that he was doing the right thing. He has a certain number of beliefs and values that align with that as his truth. Mm. And so what I love that you said at the very beginning, Senator, is that it really is about thinking differently. It is honouring the people that are really telling the truth, listening to things that aren't in the mainstream, and actually having a curious, questioning mind. Mm-hmm. I even suggest for everyone listening to our podcast, don't believe everything we say. I hope that we, Cindy and I, create a questioning society. I personally have not got a degree at university and always thought that I was stupid for not having that. And yet I've always thought that a university degree was about creating more critical thinkers, more lateral thinkers, more open thinkers. And yet my understanding of the school system and the university system, and this is just a generalization, is that you have to follow a certain number of criteria to pass an exam to then give yourself the degree. And I just find that that is so different to the Steiner school philosophy, the Montessori philosophy, the open education homeschooling philosophy. I know we could talk to you forever, but is there anything you could say to the beautiful parent, the beautiful soul at home doing their absolute best to raise the next generation, and to create us all to become better critical thinkers. How would you like to summarize everything that you're about for us in this show?
I'd just say back yourself. Back yourself. Universities are woke establishments now. There are so many figures that indicate that. The University of Queensland had injection mandates on students who wanted to study. Otherwise, they had to leave the university. People who'd spent 3-4 years getting a degree in nursing of all things, where they teach what is it called when you have to give permission to get consent, informed consent, of course. The nurses do that. Here they are. They must finish their practical examination, practical work, and to do that, they must get an injection. Mm-hmm. They entered a contract with the university for that said nothing about injections, forced experimental injection. Yet they had to do that. So universities have become destroyers of minds, not stimulators of minds. So that's one thing I just say. But the whole this thing is based. We've seen it's on wealth transfer. It's on control. But underpinning it all, underpinning the whole thing, is the anti-human push that started with the Club of Rome, that's allied with the United Nations, with the World Economic Forum, and they say, humans are evil, uncaring, irresponsible, greedy. So let us, as government, take care of you. Well, governments are made up of humans. So we're putting the wrong people in charge. So I would say, first of all, sift through all of that bullshit that says that's anti-human. Sift through all of that. Recognize that you're a caring, wonderful person. We are all flawed in some way, big or small, but recognize that, do what we can about that. But I would suggest to any young mother and father, explore Montessori. But see, even there, Kim, I was educated in a Montessori school in India, and we put our kids through in a Montessori primary school, and if the high school had been there, we would have put them through that too. Montessori is wonderful. I've heard very good stuff about Steiner as well. Mm-hmm. The problem with Montessori, and I'm presuming Steiner, is that there's such breaks from conventional education. They're back to basics. They're both based upon the science of children developing. But it's very hard to get a teacher to drop their conventional practices and fit into Montessori school. Teachers think it's wonderful and they do that, but they find themselves going back to habits. So find yourself a really good Montessori school and then try and understand as much as possible about Montessori. But above all, Kim, when it comes to schooling, try and homeschool, because that's the only way you can guarantee the standard of education. But then we've got a tax system that drives both parents to work. So who can homeschool? So it's a matter of sorting it. Yeah, well, there you go. If they've got one handy. But Maria Montessori, in my opinion, is the most, she's dead now, but she's done by far the most comprehensive work of studying children and studying human behavior, human development. I mean, she was just an incredibly talented woman, very, very objective, very disciplined, and she worked. I don't know if you've read some of her books. I've read a few of her books. They're so packed with information, it's hard to read, but they're wonderful. And science is now confirming bits and pieces here and there, but she had the whole picture. And she said the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect are birth to 6. That's when the kids are at home. Mm. So it's the family that's the critical thing, even more so than school. So just back yourself.
Yeah.
Back yourself. Trust yourself.
Malcolm, on behalf of Kim and I want to thank you. We could have asked you a million more questions. In actual fact, I've listened to you speak quite a few times live, once with Asima Malhotra, and the other time you were up here on the Sunshine Coast speaking at Majimba. So I've really enjoyed everything you've said, and we are so honoured that you have decided to come on up for a chat, and we will make sure that this podcast goes far and wide through not only Australia but throughout the world. So thank you very much.
No, you're welcome, and thank you for the invitation. And keep doing what you're doing is far more important than the mouthpiece media. The free, independent people's media is crucial.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.